Hello, Linda.
Hi, Susan. So nice to see you.
Well, it's really neat here. We are two countries away.
Perfect.
It's
Perfect.
really nice to have this conversation with you. I think it's an important one that we have, and we're really kind of excited to be talking Canadian friends to U.S. friends. So welcome. I'm wondering if just before we start off, you could tell for those watching our video a little bit about who you are, what you do, and it'll set some context why this conversation will be so interesting for me and for all of them as well.
Wonderful. It's so nice to be here and be a part of this because I do believe this is a very important conversation in these very oftentimes difficult times. So I work with Jerry Costa and Corinne Catalano at the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health at Montclair State University. And I have been blessed to work with Jerry for, 17 years now, almost 18 years. My background is in infant and pediatric massage therapy. And as much as I love to massage and bring massage to children and babies and children, what I realized, I've worked as the infant and pediatric massage therapist at Children's Hospital in Newark, Beth Israel, for many, many years. What I learned very quickly is I believe the most important person that can be doing the massage is parents.
Yeah.
Not me as a massage therapist. And I really came very quickly to understand that my work was in combining my training in infant mental health and pediatric massage at that intersection where I can help parents to find the way to bring their nurturing and loving touch to their children to help their children. And my career has been in working with families and children with special needs. And oftentimes at the basis of those special needs problems or difficulties is always some type of sensory touch or sensory difficulties. And by addressing those, we can so often help to change those developmental trajectories because touch is the first thing to develop in utero. And if we can go back and help those sensory difficulties to normalize, then oftentimes it is incredibly helpful and becomes a foundation for further healthy development. And I really believe that should be in parents' hands.
You know, I could listen to you talk all day. I don't know if you know this. I think I've told you I'm a fan, but there's something about, it's not just the work that you do that I find so touching. And I've heard you tell stories over I guess we've known each other a year and a half or so now, just over a year. But it's also the way you speak. I feel, when I'm speaking with you, I feel calmer. You know, when I'm hearing you talk about your the value placed on relationships, but even in the work that you do and how central you put parents and parents' well-being in the relationship with the children's well-being. I don't know, there's just something I find very soothing about having conversations with you. Do others say that to you?
Yes, and it's my highest compliment because I believe ultimately that's what I hope to bring. And I look at touch and massage and the different sensory protocols that I help parents to learn really as the tool. You know, that's the tool we're using. But the purpose of the tool is to strengthen that relationship, to open up those channels, to find that quiet, peaceful place from which all relationship begins.
I love it.
And when we bring it even back to the stress response, I think so often what those tactile and sensory difficulties really start the stress cycle in children. And we don't understand that. And we need to bring that back to soothing and that rest, restore. But the third R is rest, restore. And the first thing a child will do when they're resting and restoring is relating.
Absolutely.
Back to the relationship. It's really all how we can help and bring that quiet place where relationships begin.
And it's all interrelated. I mean, we're not looking, your focus is on touch, but as I hear you speak, you're also always thinking about whole person, whole family, whole community. It's all interrelated. This is about well-being. This is about all different kinds of, you could look at outcomes in all sorts of different ways that we're worried about. In our work, as you know, with Self-Reg, we are, that's really what we do. We're we're looking at stress. And by that, we're talking about, the brain body systems of stress and about the management of energy and tension. But the really important thing is well-being, and how learning this about our own systems and those of our children and others can actually help. I think it's actually an important step for society, and it's about moving along the wellness in bigger groups. We hear all the time about the anxiety going through the roof, and about stressors of every kind that we're hearing about schools. We're hearing about people that we work with that are really worried about, things seem to be getting worse, behaviors are getting worse, they're dealing with more and more problems all the time, and we're always trying to figure out what we can do about that. And I really think we share some common answers. But we're, at this time, Stuart and I, and I have to tell you, all your Canadian friends, but we're really, we're as glued to the news, these days, and have been for some time, living in such close proximity. I mean, what happens in the States affects Canada. I mean, we are very different, but to say we're not influenced and that we don't care, when many of us have relatives. My dad was American, and I will just turn that off. So my dad, so there's lots of connections down there. But I think particularly with what's going on right now, and that we're worried about, I'm worried deeply about kids and families, and leaving the politics of whatever the world is going on in the world aside. I'm worried about their well-being, and just wondering what the experience is on your end. Like, I mean, I imagine, children worried about, are they going to be sent away and out of the country, or worried about, their family, or worried about jobs, or worried about, policies that are going to affect their lives in really serious ways. And I find it's very hard to even try to comprehend. Are you seeing any of those sorts of things on your end?
We're seeing them everywhere. I think I haven't seen this type of widespread stress in many, many years. I've worked for many years in communities that live under those types of stresses. So high-risk populations with poverty, violence, those types of things. And I think this now gives us a sense maybe of compassion of how those types of communities and families have lived all the time. And we're now, oh, hello.
That's Mr. Ryan. He broke into the room, by the way.
Good.
Chester.
One of our best strategies.
Yeah. Oh, it is, absolutely.
But I'm really finding, because I've worked in those communities for many, many years, where they live under those types of stresses and strains. And now I think it's just more widespread. So for those of us who have been kind of shielded, and we speak about living in a bubble in certain communities, and we have, but those bubbles have all been burst. And I think we are all now of a family that we are all living under these stresses. And I think to a certain extent, we can take a positive view that this now really puts this front and center and helps us address these things consciously, very consciously. And I think this can be very hopeful.
I do too. And I always like the positive view. It's not trying to be, put the rose-colored glasses on necessarily, but there's a whole bunch of reasons that we've ended up, or you've ended up, and it's affecting all of us in the world. And there's not just one. It has not just about an election, or not just about there's many, many factors, and it causes us to bring some maybe greater intentionality behind our decisions, and we are seeing already changes, like the movement towards, there's a lot of a nature-based movement, the movement towards slow foods. I mean, we're seeing it there's in a variety of different fields. And I think that, I don't know about you, but one of my biggest personal stressors for me is feeling in limbo and not sure what feel that sense of I can't do anything about it. And I think that's one of the important reasons for our conversation today. Just not just between you and I, but maybe anyone watching, wondering if they, I had my daughter come home at one point and ask me, she's just turned 9, and last fall she came home and had gone through her whole school, and this is in Canada, that World War III was coming. I mean, that's a very big thing for a very little girl to come home with terrified looking out the windows, you know, and then, so what do you do and how do you respond and how do you, you know, and there's no magic answers. I did the best I could in those situations. But I'm wondering if, I mean, that was just one of my own personal examples. As we know, that there are lots of people out there very worried, very stressed, lots of parents, lots of caregivers of all different, you know, families of all different shapes and sizes, and they're just not quite sure what they can do about it, maybe even feeling a little bit helpless. And I know if we look at the science, they don't need to feel that way, and that there's an awful lot that every one of us can do. Maybe it's just our little piece, but a whole bunch of little pieces together can really have an effect.
And to me, that's the most hopeful part. And I think that's where it's most important that we come back to.
Absolutely.
Because if you take the bite of the whole thing, it is overwhelming.